Where's my chairman? You right here?
We're Frank, yep.
First, how's everyone? Good.
Good.
Good. So let me first thank the task force for participating members, all of you all, for the work that you've done. I was really excited about the co-chairmanships of this. John, you've done an extremely great job, and Franklin, thank you so much for agreeing to be co-chair of this, and also for delivering the report that I look forward to extensively reviewing and taking all that has been shared into careful consideration. I also want to thank Carol Gilbert. She's the Assistant Secretary. Hi, Carol. Let me just say thank you on behalf of the City of Baltimore, because you've done a great job around neighborhood revitalization, helping us to find different pathways as it relates to some of the needs of the city. And so we're really grateful for, you helped us with our stabilization center. You've done a lot of creative things in Baltimore, and we know that this is one of the areas that you're concerned about as well. The state recently just awarded us some $200,000 for the stabilization and renovation and expansion of the compound, the Artists Live Where You Work space in the Midway neighborhood. Again, thank you. This is a type of grant and partnership that we see in the city, the state, that artist spaces need in order to stabilize and thrive in Baltimore City. As I've often said, our artist community is very important to us, as is all of our communities, to be honest with you. But they bring a certain economic value to the city, and we want to make sure that we're continuing to enhance and grow that community in our city. The arts community has always been important, a part of Baltimore's culture. It has certainly been a great part of our city. While the safety of artist spaces is imperative, there's also an intrinsic value in these spaces which offer resources that establish, help emerging artists. We want more emerging artists in Baltimore. We want the art community to feel more than welcome to be a part of our city. And I'm really excited about just my preliminary look at the report. I tell you, what really excites me is what we're talking about doing around housing and using spaces that have not ordinarily been looked at for artists living. I love the idea of some of the schools that we're giving up. We had a conversation about this earlier today in terms of affordable housing. What are we doing about the school buildings that we leave empty in neighborhoods and communities, and why are we not rethinking what purpose they could be to those neighborhoods and communities? I was really gratified when I went up to the Marion House, for example, and if you've not been, I invite you to do so. The Marion House converted an old Catholic school into 22 wonderful, and I tell folks, could rival any apartment building in our downtown community. And that's what everyone deserves. Housing that is welcoming, housing that offers opportunity, and housing that becomes a fabric of our city. We know that we'll be talking about how we amend our zoning code. We'll be talking with the council about that. But there are relevant agencies that are also engaged in this. So we'll be talking with the housing department, the planning department, the fire department, the Baltimore Development Corporation. Thank you again for working with this particular task force. So I look forward to a thorough review of this, but more importantly, I look forward to the continued creativity in our community and the expansion and growth of the artist community, and making sure that the spaces in which they live are safe, welcoming, and more importantly, affordable as well. So, John, I'm going to turn it over to you.
I think to Frank first,
or Frank
if you don't
first.
mind.
Frank first, and then John. Frank.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
You get to mention the low-interest loans as well. Okay?
Okay. First of all, I wanted to wish everyone a joyous holiday and say thank you to the task force for all the hard work that they did, because this was an opportunity for us to serve our community. And it's also my pleasure to thank a few dedicated individuals who helped make this possible today. So there are many people to acknowledge, but we'll start with Madam Mayor. John and I would like to thank Her Honor and her staff for recognizing the need and forming the task force in the first place. You know, we are fortunate that we didn't have a tragedy like the Ghost Ship, but it took an incident like that for us to take a hard look at our DIY spaces and our arts community so that we could try to prevent something like that from happening. The Mayor's Chief of Operations, Peter Hammond, and his Special Assistant, Andrew Aylshire, were invaluable to the process by providing guidance and local support. Michael Braverman, the DHCD Commissioner, and Teresa Everett, the City Fire Department's Assistant Chief of Risk. I see her over there.
She's right here.
Oh, very good. They were all both important in helping us to understand the regulations and the codes that we needed to realize in this process. We had 3 work group chairs who completed the lion's share of the work. Amy Bonnetts, who's president and CEO of Baltimore Arts Realty Corporation. She chaired our Code and Regulations work group. Jeannie Howe is the executive director of the Greater Baltimore Cultural Alliance. She chaired the Art Space Needs work group. And then Dana Johnson was the managing director of the Maryland and DC divisions of the Reinvestment Fund, and she chaired our project development and finance work group. So lastly, none of this would have been possible if we didn't have the task force itself. So if you're a member of the task force, if you would raise your hand so everyone can see who you are. We had a diverse segment of Baltimore's population, and they represented various members of the public and private sector. So we had artists, foundations, musicians, bankers, nonprofits, and I've already mentioned the city agencies that took part of the task force as well. We started this process back in January, and by having regular meetings. And all of our meetings, we invited people and participants to present and ask questions and to be a part of the process by joining in and making suggestions on all the information that we presented at our various meetings. Most of our meetings were held at MICA, but we also met at various locations around the city as well. With the help of Task Force member Beth Blower, we established a website and conducted an anonymous survey to identify artists' needs and space requirements as well. On February 16th, we held a public listening session to gain broader artist and public input. And that was held at the War Memorial Building, and we had approximately 150 people attending that. And we're once again, artists and arts communities, arts organizations, and the community at large were able to share concerns, make suggestions, and express their desires when it came to our process. As we state in our background portion of our final report, this is a great moment in time for us to take this opportunity to ensure that Baltimore continues to have a thriving hub for artists and arts by working to provide readily available space for artists to work, perform, exhibit, rehearse, and live. And as the mayor mentioned, a strong and vibrant arts community is vital and critical to the growing economy of our city and a desirable quality of life. Artist communities improve our cities, create foundations for defining a sense of place, contribute to a creative and entrepreneurial workforce, and attract new businesses, residents, and visitors. Our charge was to create a citywide network of safe, cost-effective, contemporary living, studio, and performance spaces for emerging and established artists. We were asked to integrate the perspectives of various experts from the artist, design, development, financial, regulatory, and revitalization sectors of our city. And then to develop these strategies, identify resources, and propose a programmatic framework to hopefully develop and sustain spaces that protected the safety of artists and their patrons. Finally, we were asked to accomplish all of that while trying to meet the logistical and technical interests of today's performers and audiences. It was our hope that we made the process as cooperative as possible. And one great result, which I'm sure John will speak a little bit about later, is that Mayor Pugh issued an executive order in April. And we haven't had any other closings or displacements since then. We believe that this is a direct result of the agencies involved, housing, fire, and legal, as well as the DIY arts community, communicating their needs during this process. As a former Marine officer, I'm often thanked for my years of service, and then a speaker will lament that they didn't have the opportunity to serve as well. But this was an opportunity for all of us to serve, and the task force did that. And this was an opportunity to serve our city. So again, we offer our sincere thanks to task force members and the city agencies that helped us, and we thank you once again for participating in this effort. And I can't stress enough our appreciation to the task force and all the work that they did. Thank you.
Thanks, Frank.
Now we have our other co-chair, John. Oh, y'all can go ahead and applaud him. And now it's our councilman who also serves on the committee, Councilman Stokes.
Thank you. I'm John Larry. Madam Mayor, Councilman Stokes, members of the task force. I'll be very brief. I just want to review a few of the recommendations for context. I just would start by saying I can't overemphasize enough the importance of the executive order that Frank alluded to. That executive order, which I think led the nation and was recognized around the country, has established a model of cooperation and a best practice in the making from a mayor who prides herself on establishing best practices. Since the task force started, that team of compelled by the executive order has responded to owners of art spaces, both who came forward voluntarily as well as in response to reports. The total square footage of spaces who have been addressed by that group is in the hundreds of thousands. Over 300 artists live and work there. And the team has worked, as Frank said, to keep those spaces open while working with property owners to improve safety. That is quite an accomplishment. Credit especially to the housing and fire departments, as well as to Amy Bonnets at Barco, as Frank mentioned, who's been playing a real role there and continues to do that today. Even before the report, the city had already been working with partners to bring resources to the table. TRF, represented here and on the task force by Dana Johnson, was selected by the Kresge Foundation as one of 3 cities to invest low-cost loan capital for cultural projects. Last year, BDC and the Downtown Partnership helped to secure $800,000 in state capital for Howard Street art projects, and as just alluded to, the mayor and Central Baltimore Partnership and Barco, with the help of Carol Gilbert and Secretary Holt at the state, have just recently secured $600,000 in state capital for projects in 2017, the Compound, Area 405, and the Playhouse Theater. So we're here today to formally deliver the task force recommendations, and I'm just going to give you a flavor of them. Obviously, there are reports here, and no one wants me to read the entire thing, so I won't. But let me just describe. There were several categories. The first category is city support for artists and art spaces. This is really staff support. We are asking the mayor and recommending that she designate a single staff member as her point person on development and support of art spaces, and that she create an interagency art space resource team, which we have cleverly called the ART team, led by her point person, to stay on top and ahead of these issues. As you've already heard, this has begun already, but we hope that you will formalize it and look forward to that coming together. The ART team is being asked to continue to build on the executive order that the mayor issued in April. Technical assistance to artists and art spaces is probably the thing that came out most often and most strongly in the process. We're recommending that the mayor fund or seek third-party funding for a technical assistance program. Again, this has begun already with the help of the Goldsecker Foundation. Matt Gallagher is here from Goldsecker, and they have provided some funding to Barco already to begin this technical assistance. This helps artists and art space owners navigate what is a complex regulatory process, also to be a resource for design services, to prepare grant and loan applications, and so on. And we also lay out other tasks that the technical assistance provider should do, including workshops, safety classes, and immediate safety things such as fire extinguishers and carbon monoxide detectors and so on. The third category is to promote and link artists to existing and available resources. Some of them already exist, such as Spacefinder. Jeannie Howe from Greater Baltimore Cultural Alliance is here. They manage the Spacefinder website, which is a searchable database for shorter-term occupancies. Jeannie has also been involved, and we recommend strong support for a terrific national initiative called Art in Sacred Spaces. This is a program that puts underutilized portions of places of worship for use as art spaces, generating hopefully some revenue for those places and additional venues for artists. Those organizations need further investment. As the mayor mentioned, code and regulatory changes, we've uncovered several, including an amendment to the zoning code that will facilitate the creation of mixed-use art spaces comprising art studios, art galleries, and communal housing rather than single uses. And Commissioner Braverman, who's here, has taken the lead in creating and enhancing a code modification process to address repetitive but very solvable issues such as ingress and egress and so on, and he's cataloging those so that they can be used again and again. The mayor alluded to the recommendation regarding schools. In addition to the opportunity from potential schools that are coming offline as part of the 21st Century Schools Initiative, the city has a very successful track record of making vacant and underutilized spaces available and productive for art uses. So we recommend that the city develop a business plan to make city-owned property available for live, work, and performance spaces. These spaces have the potential to create 24/7 nodes of activity and can help stabilize neighborhoods in addition to providing.
And that's a really important point, because one of the things I was pointing out earlier today is, the story is really not being told correctly around school closings. For example, we opened 2 brand new schools this year. We're opening another 4 next year, and another 7 the year after that, while we're closing 5. And so what we leave those communities with is very important. And so we should be utilizing the space of these buildings that are there in neighborhoods and communities as places that can be populated by artists and others. And so we're looking forward to
Yes,
that.
exactly, and thank you very much for that. The city has other property, including rec centers and public spaces that can be used even for temporary art spaces, pop-ups, people call them, that just contribute to urban vitality and city life. There are opportunities with private sector real estate owners to identify potential sites, especially in underutilized industrial areas and along commercial corridors. I want to talk for a moment about funding. Many of our recommendations do not need additional funding, and the resources are indeed scarce, but certainly some of them do. The technical assistance program needs a sustainable, probably non-governmental source of capital. And a pool of capital is also necessary, not for major ground-up development necessarily, but for gap financing so that existing locations can meet code requirements or make essential improvements. And that can include funds, it can include guarantees from foundations and others, and we're in discussions with a number of parties around the city who are interested in providing that kind of resource. Also, we have a recommendation for microloans. These are very small loans that fill gaps in people's financial needs. They typically fall outside of traditional underwriting standards. The BDC and others have experience with these programs, and we're hoping that microloans can be put to use specifically to help artists and art spaces make small capital improvements and pay for operating expenses. And finally, most of you are aware of the existence of 3 arts and entertainment districts in Baltimore, Station North, Highlandtown, and the Bromo Tower. These have been successful, but they're constrained by state law, which defines artists in a somewhat outdated way. For example, it doesn't include things like makerspace, which everybody's familiar with, and tremendous demand for that kind of space in the city. So we make a suite of recommendations, which are detailed in the report, including some legislative fixes in Annapolis, working in concert with other A&E districts around the state, creation of a sweat equity program, purchase money financing, facade improvement funds, emergency grants, tax credits, and so on. The idea is to make these arts and entertainment districts meaningful for people who live there, to provide incentives for people to go there, to build there, to stay there, to live there. And very importantly, we recommend exploration of creation of new districts, especially in and around Pennsylvania and North Avenues. As everyone knows, that is a historic center of African American arts and culture in Baltimore that would benefit from investment of all types and is ripe for this kind of investment, the task force believes. So that is a summary of the recommendations that are in the report. Hopefully you'll have a chance to read it. Madam Mayor, we know you'll need to evaluate these recommendations, but we know that you will do that seriously and as quickly as you and your team can do that. And as you see fit to implement them, know that we will join you to do what we can to make Baltimore a model for the way we serve and the way we nurture our arts community. So thank you very much, Madam Mayor. And task force members, let me just add my thanks to Franks for your hard work. We appreciate it.
Again, let me applaud the efforts of the task force and look forward to a thorough review of the recommendations, but I can tell you that what I've heard thus far certainly is of my greatest interest. And most importantly, I think I'll point it out again, is how we're using these spaces, especially our surplus schools, to create environments of art and for artists. And I know that there are other properties owned by the city that we can turn into opportunities for our artists to engage. And so, again, thank you so much for this. I will read it very carefully and very thoroughly, and I'm excited to receive it. I was wondering when y'all were going to get it together. But no, seriously, you all, I know this was hard work, and you were meticulous, and you spent a great deal of time listening and hearing from folks around the community, which is also very important. And then to have worked with the various agencies to get a really complete understanding of what it takes to move these spaces and to change them so that we make them affordable and available to the arts community, and recognizing that there are laws and things that must be changed. So again, thank you all for doing this, and more importantly, I think the arts community looks forward to us moving this whole effort forward. Thank you all. Any questions for me?
Mayor, is that what excites you the most, the fact that some of these schools or soon-to-be vacant schools could potentially turn into an art space? It seems
Yeah,
like
again, the reason I brought the schools up is because I just think that the way that we're depicting the closures of schools and communities is inaccurate. You know, it's not just about closing schools, it's what we leave in those neighborhoods and communities. And then when we do that, when we have a story like that, what we fail to tell the city or tell the community is that $1 billion came from the state to build brand new schools in our city. And we built two opened up this year, 4 will open up next year, 7 the year after that. And so we must prepare our community in a proper way. And utilizing these spaces for arts and for affordable housing, I think bodes well for the city. So we should not be leaving buildings empty in communities, because I think that's what creates the fear among those who live in the city the most, is that they live in these neighborhoods and these communities, and many people want to refer to them as poor neighborhoods, but what they don't realize is that there are people who've lived in those neighborhoods for decades. They own their homes. They would like the same kind of investment opportunity, and this creative community can be an addition to those neighborhoods. Any other questions?
Mayor, when do you expect to begin implementing the recommendations?
How about I read them? Okay, let me begin by reading them. And I look forward to working with this committee and the arts community. And, you know, I want to read them thoroughly.
Mayor, can you speak to any of the recommendations? Did any of them recommend providing public funding for non-compliant art spaces such as the...
Well, let me just once again point out that the Goldsecker Foundation is here, and I want to thank Matt for being a part of this effort. You know, last week I had to raise $6 million of private dollars to deal with some of the violent crime in our city, when we know that there are programs out there that do work. And then previously, we just got another $5 million grant from the Bloomberg Philanthropies. You know, the city can't solve all the problems financially, but we certainly have the capacity and ability to reach out, and we will continue to do that, and we'll look to see what we have in public funding as well. Any other questions? Thank you all. Have a great day. Yes, sir.
I'm sorry. Do you imagine that any of the funding coming to work on violence in the city would overlap with some of the funding needed?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely, because again, I don't think that there are those in our communities that don't understand the great impact of what art does, art therapy, there are all kinds of great things, and then we want folks to live in our city, and we want everybody who can contribute to reducing violence in our city to be a part of that, and certainly the arts community is a part of that.
Chief, maybe just before we go, we could ask you a quick question, just how you guys are playing a role in all this in terms of making sure something that happened in Oakland like that doesn't happen here.
They introduced Assistant Chief Everett. Assistant Chief Everett, her actual title is Community Risk Reduction, Assistant Chief of Community Risk Reduction. So what the mayor, her buzzword and her motto statement is collaboration.
Collaboration.
Right.
Collaboration.
And what she means, what ultimately what she wants us to do is when we have problems, she wants all those individuals who can make decisions that are affected to sit at the table to do it. So that's what the fire department is doing now. We know that there are code enforcement issues. So instead of us being on the back end, we're on the front end in this process.
Okay, thank you, everybody. Thanks.
Chief, sorry.